The moment the envelope touched Prince William's hand, everything changed, not just for him, not just for his brother, but for the entire monarchy itself. Because inside that single sealed document was an answer to a question nobody in the palace ever wanted asked out loud. And yet, somehow, everyone had already been whispering, this wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. Not so suddenly. Not with this much silence surrounding it. Because for years now, the world had been distracted. Distracted by interviews, distracted by accusations, distracted by emotional confessions and televised heartbreak. But beneath all that noise, behind the polished palace walls and carefully crafted public appearances, there had always been something else. Something quieter, something colder, something procedural. Doubt. It didn't begin with evidence. It began with instinct. Palace insiders would never admit it publicly, but there had been moments. Moments when timelines didn't align perfectly. Moments when conversations abruptly stopped when certain names were mentioned. Moments when senior aides exchanged glances that said more than words ever could. And Prince William noticed. He always noticed. Unlike his younger brother, William had been trained from birth not just to represent the monarchy, but to protect it. Not emotionally, not sentimentally, structurally, institutionally, permanently, which meant he had learned very early that sometimes the greatest threats didn't come from enemies outside the palace gates. Sometimes they came from inside. At first, the rumors were easy to ignore. Tabloids speculated constantly. Social media dissected every photograph, every public appearance, every detail with obsessive precision. Most of it was nonsense. Most of it was noise. But then something shifted. It wasn't one event. It was a pattern. Questions began surfacing quietly in private briefings. Not accusations, not conclusions, just questions. Questions about records, questions about documentation, questions about procedural verification that under normal circumstances would never even need to be asked. Because royal births weren't just personal events, they were constitutional events. Every detail mattered, every record mattered, every verification mattered. And when even the smallest procedural anomaly appeared, even something as minor as inconsistent documentation timing or unusual filing adjustments, it didn't trigger panic. It triggered protocol. William didn't react emotionally. He reacted methodically. Behind closed doors, far away from cameras and public speculation, quiet conversations began taking place. Conversations that weren't hostile, but weren't comfortable either. Conversations that weren't driven by personal suspicion, but by institutional obligation. Because the monarchy didn't operate on trust alone. It operated on verification. At first, William resisted going further. He didn't want to believe there was anything worth investigating. He didn't want to believe his own family could become the subject of internal scrutiny. He didn't want to become the man who asked questions nobody wanted answered. But he was also the future king. And future kings didn't have the luxury of ignoring structural uncertainty. So the process began quietly, carefully, officially invisible. No announcements, no public acknowledgement, no leaks, just procedure. The request itself wasn't dramatic. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't even confrontational. It was administrative, routine, on paper, explosive in implication. And for months, nothing happened. Or at least, nothing visible happened. Behind the scenes, verification channels were activated. Legal advisors reviewed historical precedents. Institutional safeguards were quietly examined. Not because anyone had proven wrongdoing, but because uncertainty itself was a liability. And uncertainty in a monarchy was dangerous. Meanwhile, publicly, everything appeared normal. William continued his royal duties, public appearances continued, family photographs continued. The monarchy projected stability, continuity, permanence. But inside William's private world, the waiting had begun. Because once you ask a question like that, even indirectly, you can't unask it. You can't unknow the answer once it arrives. And then, finally, it did. Not with drama, not with announcement, with an envelope, delivered quietly, logged officially, handled discreetly. No one outside a microscopic circle even knew it existed. The envelope didn't look important. No royal insignia, no dramatic markings, just official documentation sealed with procedural neutrality. But William knew. He didn't open it immediately. That was the detail that shocked insiders the most, because this wasn't just information, it was consequence. Opening that envelope meant crossing an invisible line from speculation into certainty, from doubt into knowledge, from family into institution. For several minutes, he just stared at it, not as a brother, as a future king. Because once he knew what was inside, every decision afterward would be shaped by it. Every interaction, every conversation, every silence. The monarchy wasn't just a family. It was a structure built on legitimacy. And legitimacy wasn't emotional. It was factual. When he finally opened it, there were no dramatic reactions, no visible shock, no emotional collapse, just stillness. stillness. Cold, controlled stillness. The kind of stillness that comes when someone trained their entire life to suppress reaction finally encounters something they cannot emotionally process in real time. He read every line carefully, twice, then closed the file. No one knows exactly what those results said. Not officially, not publicly. But people noticed something else. Something subtle. Something behavioral. Because after that day, William changed. Not publicly, not in obvious ways, but in microscopic ways only insiders would recognize. His interactions became more formal, more measured, more institutional. Less brother, more heir. Private meetings increased. Legal consultations intensified. Internal palace coordination quietly accelerated. Not announcements, preparation. Because whatever William had read, it hadn't ended anything. It had begun something. Meanwhile, Harry remained thousands of miles away, living a life completely separate from the system William was now responsible for protecting. Whether Harry knew about the process, whether he anticipated it, whether he feared it, nobody outside that inner circle could say. But the distance between the brothers was no longer just geographical, it was constitutional. And silence became the loudest signal of all. Because in the monarchy, silence wasn't absence. It was containment. The palace didn't deny anything, but it didn't confirm anything either. No statements, no clarifications, just silence. Strategic silence. The kind of silence that exists not to hide truth, but to control when truth becomes visible. Because timing in monarchy was everything, and William understood timing better than anyone. He knew this wasn't just about personal relationships anymore. This was about continuity, stability, legacy. Because the monarchy didn't survive scandals by reacting emotionally. It survived by reacting structurally. And whatever those results revealed, whatever certainty they delivered, William now carried that knowledge alone, not as a brother, as the future king. The palace didn't erupt into chaos, it froze because chaos was visible. Chaos was loud. Chaos could be explained away as emotional reaction. But what settled over Buckingham Palace after William received those results was something far more dangerous: calculation. And calculation meant permanence. In the days that followed, William didn't confront anyone publicly. He didn't issue statements. He didn't summon Harry. He didn't even allow the slightest hint of disruption to appear in his public duties. To the outside world, he remained exactly what he had always been: calm, composed, reliable, unshaken. But inside palace corridors, subtle shifts were unfolding with surgical precision. Meetings were being scheduled that hadn't existed on the calendar before. Legal advisors who normally handled ceremonial matters were suddenly involved in discussions about institutional continuity. Senior aides began reviewing protocols that hadn't been examined in decades. Protocols designed not for ordinary royal events, but for structural contingencies. Because monarchy wasn't just tradition, it was engineering. And when structural integrity came into question, even theoretically, contingency planning became mandatory. No one used dramatic language. No one said the words out loud. No one needed to, because everyone understood what was at stake, not reputation. Legitimacy. There's a difference. Reputation can recover. Reputation can be repaired. Reputation can be reshaped through time, through narrative, through public forgiveness. Legitimacy cannot. Legitimacy is binary. It exists or it doesn't. And William, now carrying knowledge very few people possessed, had become the single point of intersection between personal loyalty and institutional obligation. He wasn't just protecting his family anymore. He was protecting a 1,000-year-old system built entirely on the unbroken chain of verified lineage. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Harry continued living publicly, attending events, making appearances, speaking openly about his independence from royal control. On the surface, nothing had changed. But insiders noticed something unusual. The palace wasn't reacting to Harry anymore. It was bypassing him. Communications became indirect. Coordination became minimal. Official channels that once existed between branches of the family became quieter, thinner, more procedural, not hostile, just distant. And distance in monarchy is rarely accidental. Harry may not have known the specifics, but he could feel the shift, because distance has weight, silence has texture, and absence has meaning. Back inside palace walls, William began doing something even more telling. He began preparing for outcomes, not outcomes based on accusation, outcomes based on possibility. Because once verification processes exist, they create branching futures, futures that must be managed carefully regardless of emotional consequence. Legal frameworks were reviewed. Constitutional advisors examined precedents that stretched back centuries, moments when lineage questions had forced monarchies across Europe into irreversible decisions. Some outcomes involved silence, some involved acknowledgement, some involved structural adjustment. None involved simplicity, because monarchy isn't built to move quickly. It's built to endure. William wasn't trying to destroy anything. He was trying to preserve everything. But preservation sometimes requires separation. Not separation of people, separation of certainty from uncertainty. Meanwhile, whispers began leaking beyond palace walls. Not confirmed leaks, not official disclosures, but fragments. Observations. Behavioral shifts noticed by those close enough to see patterns without knowing causes. Why were certain advisors suddenly present at meetings they'd never attended before? Why were certain legal frameworks quietly reviewed? Why did William's public demeanor remain calm while his private schedule became increasingly guarded? Because preparation always leaves footprints, even when the truth remains hidden. The palace didn't deny anything, but it didn't need to. Because monarchy survives not by answering questions, but by controlling when questions become irrelevant. And William understood something now that very few people ever fully grasp. Knowledge itself is power, but timing is control. Whatever those results had revealed, William wasn't rushing toward action. He was managing trajectory, because sudden reaction creates instability. Controlled response preserves order, and order was everything. In private moments, those closest to him noticed something else. Not anger, not betrayal, burden. Because William hadn't asked for this responsibility. He inherited it. He didn't choose to become the guardian of institutional continuity. He was born into it. And now, standing at the intersection of family and crown, he faced the one reality every future monarch eventually confronts. The crown doesn't protect you. You protect the crown. Even when it costs you personally. Even when it isolates you emotionally. Even when it forces you to carry knowledge no brother should ever have to carry alone. Meanwhile, outside palace walls, the public remained largely unaware of the silent machinery operating beneath the surface. They saw appearances, ceremonies, smiles, stability. They didn't see verification processes, legal consultations, strategic containment. Because monarchy's greatest strength isn't its visibility, it's its invisibility. The ability to absorb uncertainty without revealing fracture. The ability to stabilize internally while appearing externally unchanged. And William had mastered that ability completely, not because he wanted to, because he had to. The results, whatever they confirmed, whatever they clarified, whatever certainty they delivered, had not detonated the monarchy. They had activated its defense mechanisms. Quietly, precisely, irreversibly. William didn't need to speak publicly. He didn't need confrontation. He didn't need exposure. Because monarchy doesn't win through argument. It wins through continuity. And continuity had now been secured, one way or another. Harry may never publicly acknowledge what happened behind palace walls. The world may never see the documents William saw. The truth may remain sealed indefinitely. But one thing had become undeniably clear. The future king had asked the question. The future king had received the answer. And the future king had already begun shaping the future accordingly. Not as a brother, not as a son, but as the man who would one day wear the crown and protect it at any cost. Did at any cost. Did at any cost. Did at any